A very good afternoon. About a decade ago, my family and I moved to Holland from the New England area. We started in a small college town in New Hampshire and drove more than 1,000 miles in 3 days. While I am not a fan of these long road trips, I have to admit that if you pay careful attention, they can give you a sense of how a community is doing. You see, our journey took us across the industrial heartlands of America, where we saw big cities and busy highways, yet we also saw some tired downtowns, vacant plants, and abandoned homes. Seeing these places, I recall the shocks that reverberated when Detroit filed for bankruptcy in 2013, followed then by the Flint water crisis. As a community planning and design consultant with more than 15 years of experience in research, teaching, and practice, I could not help but wonder why and how have some communities thrived even in the midst of change. I was really fortunate to have a very special mentor, Bill Johnson. Bill was an absolute giant in the field of landscape architecture. He was Dean Emeritus at the University of Michigan, one of the founders of Johnson, Johnson & Roy, now Smith Group, and he was also a national leader who shaped communities of all kinds as they responded to the ever-changing needs of the world around them. From our downtown Holland to the Crystal Mountain Resort, and even the Asahikawa waterfront in Japan. Every Tuesday, Bill and I would get together for coffee breaks, and we would do this with our good friend, Mark Tannis. And towards the final few years of Bill's life, these coffee chats focused on distilling the essence of what Bill refers to as framework thinking, a type of process to nimbly navigate change and development in the community. And my hope is that by the end of our coffee chat today, that you can walk away with two things. One, the both-and mindsets that could be cultivated for embracing change and transformation. And second, some of the basic elements of framework thinking, a process that focuses not just on the journey, but the how of having a better journey towards better outcomes. So let's start here in downtown Holland, which is simply a postcard-perfect example of an exceptional Main Street, where we have free and easily accessible parking, well-maintained buildings with no broken windows, all housing a great variety of restaurants, retailers, services, and local coffee shops. And then, of course, we have these beautiful parks, streets, and sidewalks that are heated by snowmelt, which means that here in a Michigan winter, if you are in downtown Holland, you don't even have to shovel. And to me, that's taking it to a whole other level for a downtown. Yet little did I know when we first moved here that downtown Holland is actually a story of how a community responded to a challenge and thrived. Back in the 1980s, when plans for an indoor downtown mall fell through, and major retail anchors such as Sears and JCPenney then left for US 31. Our local merchants rallied, as did the city and Hope College and several area business leaders like Prince, Hayworth, and Herman Miller. It was this unique confluence of both transformational and pragmatic leaders who were central to downtown Holland's revival. You see, they didn't define the challenge as one of just finding replacement retailers. Together with other leaders like Bill Johnson, Gordon Van Wylen, and Greg Robinson, they saw a much greater potential beyond the street. They saw the relationships between downtown and the waterfronts, downtown and our parks and Windmill Island Garden, and our neighborhoods, and Hope College, and the seminary, and downtown as a destination for our region. And in this destination downtown framework that you see here, that was originally sketched by Bill, the leaders focused on distilling just the big ideas that would drive the vision and the action. The first was to have a strong business core commingling quality shops and residential life. The second was to have distinctive gateways to give you a sense of arrival at a very special place. And then it was about embracing the waterfronts and lining them with greenways and tying them back to downtown. And lastly, it was folding in the surrounding institutional, civic, and cultural life. The key here was to connect all of these great community assets with downtown. And I want to be very clear that what you are seeing up there is not a plan. It is a framework kept intentionally loose just to focus on the big ideas that would drive the transformation. And so with this direction in hand, the leaders got to work and then dug deeper into the details. They put in place the innovative snowmelt system, invested extensively in our streetscapes, where we now have lush plantings, comfortable benches, Victorian-style streetlights, trees that offer shade in the summer and are now starting to turn into a brilliant sea of yellow, orange, and red in the fall. They were also strategic about the developments that they undertook, pairing new developments with the loving refurbishment of our historic buildings. That was blended with charming pocket parks of beauty and respite, alongside an intentional strategy of attracting national, regional, and local businesses, based on the firm belief that if you can do it well for the locals, the visitors will naturally come. And so in the first 20 years of that vision, more than $230 million was invested in downtown's revival. Yet the city and the community did not just stop there. They never once rested on their laurels. They kept building on that vision. You see, about every 10 years or so, both the public and private sector leaders would come together to revisit that vision. And in doing so, they were able to assess progress, but more importantly, they were able to build a shared understanding of what are some of the new possibilities, the new partners, and the new priorities, so that when prospects such as the Civic Center Place came along, or even the 6th Street corridor, now with the new ice skating park that's about to open, and our waterfronts, more detailed design ideas and plans like these could then be explored at a much smaller scale. And over the last few decades, these plans have then been steadily realized. Ultimately, downtown Holland did not just survive the loss of its retail anchors. It completely turned the tide and is now one of the most vibrant downtowns in America. So this framework approach that I walked you through, blending big picture vision and detailed pragmatic action, can also be applied at a much larger scale. And to do that, I would like to take you halfway across the world to my birth country of Singapore, a tiny tropical island state in Southeast Asia, with a land area no more than half of Ottawa County. And in the 1960s, when it gained independence from the British and separated from Malaysia, this island was just a mishmash of villages, plantations, and it had a small trading port. There was no industrial base, no national defense capabilities, and hardly any natural resources to speak of. Thankfully, we did have a group of very forward-thinking leaders who really crafted a two-pronged development strategy for the tiny nation. One, to tap into the global markets and to make it a really attractive place for foreign investment. And two, they believed in building a strong community with a really high quality of life. Their vision was to transform these villages into a tropical garden city. Now, this was also paired with a flexible framework to nimbly navigate change over the last 60 years and to guide decisions on how best to support population growth Where can we locate quality housing and to integrate that seamlessly with an efficient public transit system? How best to preserve the green spaces while providing abundant recreational opportunities? And today, Singapore, after decades of dogged determination and innovative and pragmatic leadership, is now truly a city in the garden and one of the best places to live in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, I can probably share more stories of communities like these that have weathered challenges and thrived, from college campuses to communities like Detroit's revitalization, downtown Zealand, and even international cities such as Paris, Melbourne, and Kyoto. What sets these places apart is not just the sustained investments that they've had to make the community strong. All these communities had a very clear vision for their community, meaning knowing what the success looked like for them. And it was also paired with a flexible strategic framework that they can nimbly pivot in the winds of change. And more importantly, at the leadership level, there's an intentional both-and mindsets that was really exercised. And this was really to be able to find the potential in every situation, to look for the win-wins, and to build the common ground. And today, I would like to offer you 3 both-and mindsets for consideration. The first, blending the visionary and the pragmatic. The distinguished American presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin observed that there are 2 kinds of leadership: the transformational leadership, also known as the visionary, and the transactional leadership, also known as the pragmatic. For most of us, we probably lean towards either end of the spectrum. Yet in reality, both mindsets need to work really well with each other. And we can start to cultivate both mindsets. So in the case of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, he tapped into both mindsets to pull this nation out of the Great Depression in the 1930s. On the visionary side of things, he rallied the people and this nation to take action with both wisdom and courage. Now, he was also highly pragmatic, where he had a team that put together policies and programs, and some of the New Deal programs have left some of the most visible legacies on the American landscape. That's our power plants, rural electrification, to roads, bridges, and dams, 200 libraries, 800 state parks, and 3 billion trees were planted. The important thing here is that they didn't just create jobs, they shaped a nation in 1 generation. And the same can be said of communities that need to blend both the visionary and the pragmatic in the face of a challenge. And the question here is, what is the common good that we're trying to achieve? And even with the limited resources that we have in hand, how can we be creative to make the good happen? The second both-and mindset is an icon that was sketched by Bill to remind us all that it's really healthy to zoom between the big picture view and the small scale thinking. At the big picture view, we're often asking communities, how would you like your community to look, feel, and be both now and into the future? And to translate that into really small scale thinking, it's how might that building, a design, a program, right down to a seemingly modest street bench, all fit into the bigger picture of a place? The zooming also happens in time, where we're balancing those long-term directions and the near-term needs. The key question here is, what are the first, most impactful moves that we can take in the next 90 days, in the next 1 year, that can drive us towards the long-term goal? And if a project is really complicated, how can we break it down into smaller pieces that build on each other to get us to the bigger picture? And the third both-and mindset is really balancing people and place, because communities are shaped by both people and place. Knowing how they interact with each other is just as important as our ability to read people, as is our ability to read place. And if Bill were here, he would probably share with us that it's not just the buildings that matter, it's the spaces between the buildings that matter just as much. Our land, our water, our parks, our streets, our utilities, and as development comes along, how can that be optimally balanced with the preservation of nature, agriculture, and history? The reality is communities are complex and highly dynamic. The way in which they respond to change will be different because they have different contexts, values, histories, governance, legal structures, and resources. Yet the one driving question for communities as they face change is not a question of can we do it, but how can we do it? And perhaps some of these elements of framework thinking might be the how. The first is to frame the challenge and to always remember to take a look at the bigger picture, that bigger frame. Max Dupree, former CEO of Herman Miller, sums this up so eloquently. He says that the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. And what exactly are we trying to solve? And given that we can now see that 30,000-foot view, what are some of the new possibilities that we see that can help us shape a new reality? The second is to build a multidisciplinary, collaborative team that can cast a shared vision together. Do we have the right people in the right seats? Are we giving them space for the talents to multiply? And are we hearing from a broad range of voices? And having heard from that broad range of voices, what is that one North Star that everybody can agree on working towards together, even if they may have different interests? And third is to focus in on the vision, the framework, and the first moves to make it happen. Going back to Holland, it's those key questions of what are the big ideas, what are the key intentions, and what are the great bones of a place that we want to enhance, and how do we start distilling all of that down into a clear, visually compelling way to inspire action with vision and to keep building towards that North Star. So, going back to our first fall here in Holland, Bill and his wife Charlotte kindly invited us over to their home, along with their good friends, the Bayers. We were on the rooftop terrace above Kilwins in downtown Holland. It was a busy Saturday evening, and as Bill took a look at the hustle and bustle of 8th Street, he paused and he said, "The work is not finished. There's more to be done." And as we each return to our communities today, how might you be a part of that unfinished work of building better, stronger communities? And how might you now see a little bit more of that bigger picture and to also be a part of shaping it? Thank you.